Hey everybody, I'm Chef Tom with allthingsbbq.com, and this is Umami Bomb Brisket. Today I'm going to be smoking up a brisket flat that is packed full of flavor, and that flavor is umami. Now umami is one of the 5 basic tastes along with sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. Umami is right there. It's the one that we consider savory. You think of cooked meats, cheeses, rich broths, those kinds of things are all umami. And we're gonna pack umami into this brisket. It's gonna come off with incredible flavor in the end, and you're gonna get these great slices that are perfect for any special meal or just whenever you're ready for some umami. All right guys, what we have here is an 8.5 pound brisket flat. Now you can see right here where they trimmed off the point, took some of our fat cap with it. That's fine. Got a little nick in the end there. You know what? This is a brisket flat in all its mediocrity. But this is a really available piece of meat, which means it's something that we should know how to cook. So what we're gonna do to this thing is just trim it up a bit. We wanna get the fat pretty even on the top here. I'd like to leave a little bit behind. On the bottom side, we can get rid of some of this excess fat as well, but we're not gonna go crazy on this thing. We're gonna pump it full of flavor. It's gonna be fantastic. One of the reasons that we want to do some of this trimming is at first glance you might not catch that little membrane there. Something that was left behind that you certainly wouldn't want to chew on, and it's not fat, so it doesn't really have a nice mouthfeel. So we get rid of anything that just looks a little bit out of place, anything you don't want to chew on later on. One thing you might come across when you're buying just the flat is that some of the point meat has been left behind. Now that's not much to make anything of, but you can see that the fibers are running this way versus the flat where the fibers are running this way. We are gonna trim around this a little bit. I'm just gonna take this edge off where I have this thick fat so I can kind of see how much of that is left behind. And you see a little bit of a line there in the fat. There's not much there, so we'll just trim that little bit of meat off. All right, so that's kind of the last of that little bit of fiber from the point there. Then we'll just leave a decent little bit of fat on here. We can't give it a 1/4 inch all the way across the surface like I'd love to, but we can leave a little bit behind where the butcher has left us the opportunity to do that, so we will. For my taste, a little bit of that fat cap is just right. Too thick, not so pleasant, but just a nice thin like 1/4 inch layer is great. We're not trimming this thing for competition, so we're just cleaning up a little bit. I feel good about where that's at. You know, just to give our rub to kind of a little something to grab on, we're gonna score the fat here. Some little crevices for the rub to creep into. And these you'll hardly notice once you get to slicing out your brisket at the end. Next, we're gonna prepare our injection. So we're gonna start with 1 cup of stock. You could use vegetable stock, you could use beef stock, or you could even just use water, because the next thing that we're gonna add to this is our Butcher Barbecue Prime Dust. And this stuff is essentially just powdered beef stock and a bit of salt. So that's gonna add tons of umami from the beefiness in that beef stock and that powdered beef stock. Beyond that, what we have are some shiitake mushrooms. Now, these are dried whole shiitake mushrooms that I've thrown into the food processor and processed down to 2 tablespoons of dried shiitake mushrooms. Shiitake and mushrooms in general also high in that umami flavor, as well as a couple tablespoons of soy sauce, again, hitting the umami bomb. So a quick shake, everything's pretty fine. It should dissolve really easily. And before we get our injector into the liquid, I'm gonna pour off a 1/4 cup to add to the wrap later on. All right, so we're gonna start at one end of the brisket, and we're going to work our needle in there, create a little pocket, start to pump some of that injection in. You should see it kind of balloon up a bit and come back out. And then we're gonna work our way down the brisket in a grid pattern, doing this same thing over and over again. Now don't worry, some of that liquid is gonna come back out, and that's fine. You really can't over-inject this because it's gonna start to push it back out when it's got enough in there. And trust me, even though you see it coming back out, far more of it is staying inside the meat and running along those fibers. So that's why when we see the fibers going left and right, we come in at a 90-degree angle, pump it up, and that juice runs right along those fibers of meat. So we've got a little more than 8 ounces of injection when you think about everything that we've added. And that's a really great number to go off of. 1 ounce per pound, 8.5 pounder, we're right there. And the next thing we're gonna do is build the flavoring on the outside of the brisket. We've got that injected full of lots of flavor, and it's gonna add a lot of moisture, which is great when you're cooking a lean piece of meat like the brisket flat. It's a really good idea to inject it. Now for the outside, we're gonna continue with the umami. We're also gonna add some funkiness. We're gonna use a miso paste, so a fermented soybean, also rich in umami, but very funky, delicious. It's gonna add a great little binder to the outside that we can put our rub on. And for our rub, we're gonna be using the Plowboys Bovine Bold. Fantastic beef rub, fantastic barbecue rub that features a bit of celery. And celery is one of those flavors that's also very high in umami, so we're gonna pump that up with a little extra celery seed. So I've got a cup here of the Bovine Bold, and we're going to mix into that 2 teaspoons of celery seed. Just give that a quick shake. All right, so we're gonna dig into our miso here. Just go right on the surface of the brisket and spread that around thin. Now, a lot of what we're doing here has quite a bit of salt in it, so we're not gonna go super heavy on this. This is a big piece of brisket, and it will soak up a lot of that salt flavor as it cooks, so I'm not too worried about it being over salty. But there's nothing wrong with just a little bit of moderation as well. Big flavors in moderation for the win. I'm gonna hit the edges here before we flip this over. Let's just give this a minute to kind of set up, get attached to the meat. This is looking good, so let's flip it over and get the other side. And we'll start with our miso. Great binder. And then we're going to come in with our bovine and our celery seed. All right, that looks perfect. Let's let that set up and we'll get it on the smoker. Now today we'll be cooking on the Yoder Smokers YS640S pellet grill. We're gonna be running it hot today at 300 degrees because sometimes you got stuff to get done, sometimes you've got a window of time to get stuff done in. If you want brisket for dinner, you might have to cook it fast. Typically I'd cook a brisket around 225 to 250. Great smoke flavor, it moves slow enough that you have a nice window of doneness in which you can pull it off and it's not underdone and it's not overdone. So that's the thing we gotta focus on today. So we wanna make sure that we get all the smoke flavor we want, and we wanna make sure that we are locked in on that doneness window because it's gonna shrink as we cook at a higher temperature. Now when you're cooking with a pellet grill, the air is moving fast at all times. No matter what kind of pellet grill it is, that air is being forced through there, right? And the way that differs from another grill such as say a Kamado style grill or an offset smoker, the air is not moving as fast on those, so the smoke sits on the food for longer. It gives the illusion of a smokier flavor, but really it's just a bit of a heavier smoke that sat there for a longer period of time. Now when the smoke's moving fast and you want to increase the amount of smoke flavor on a meat, what do? You just add more smoke. So today we'll be using an amazing tube smoker that's filled with hickory pellets to put off that extra smoke that we need. I'll give this about 30 seconds of flame and then just let it burn out on its own. All right, our brisket has landed fat side up. It's not super significant. To be honest, when you're cooking in this situation, there's no real reason to have it on the top or the bottom. Whatever is the most comfortable for your situation is fine. I'm gonna insert our probe into the thickest part, the dead center of this brisket. So now, as always, we wait. We wait for the bark to form. We wait for that beautiful color on the outside. We wait for all that smoke to soak into the meat. We wait. In the meantime, I'll be monitoring on the Fireboard app to check our internal temperature. By the time we wrap, we're expecting it to be 155 to 160. We're gonna get it wrapped up in foil nice and tight. With that extra injection that we saved back from earlier, we'll get it wrapped up and finished off. Well, we're 4 hours into the smoke on our brisket. This thing looks beautiful. The internal temperature is reading right around 165, and I tend to think about 155 to 165 is about where you want to wrap, but really we're doing that visually, so let's take a look. Just beautiful. I mean, look at that crust that's formed on there. All of that liquid on the surface. That means this thing is really starting to break down. I mean, it's tough still. We're gonna expedite that breakdown process now by wrapping it. So we're gonna go right down on double sheets of heavy duty foil. And remember, we saved back 1/4 cup of our injection that we wanna add now to the wrap. So what's gonna happen here is we're gonna wrap this thing up super tight, and all of the liquids that are melting out of the brisket, as well as this little extra liquid that we've added, it's gonna start to braise the brisket and break it down until it's super tender. So I wanna wrap this thing up just as tight as possible. And we'll go back on the grill with it. All right, so we're gonna throw this thing back on right where it was. I flipped it around just to keep things even. We wanna get the probe right there in the deepest part or the thickest part. So for now, we'll close this back up and just wait for the meat to break down. Guys, we've just crossed the 6-hour mark on our brisket smoke, and this thing is ready to come off. I'm gonna show you guys what we're looking for when we're looking for doneness, especially in the flat. You definitely don't wanna overcook these to where they just fall apart, but you certainly don't want to undercook them either. A lot of times people think, oh, my brisket's too tough, I must have overcooked it, when actually what happens when you have a tough brisket is that you have undercooked it. So we're looking for that perfect window that we talked about earlier. I'm gonna show you where that's at. Now, following along on our probes, this has come over the 205 mark now. We're gonna open this up so you can actually see the brisket itself. Temperature is a good indicator of doneness, but probe tenderness is really what's going to tell you, is my brisket fully cooked? So as we insert, there should be a little bit of resistance. You see it moves just slightly, but for the most part, there's very, very little resistance going on here, especially when we get to these thinner parts. So that's why we kind of check that thickest part first. By tenderness standards, I'd say this is ready, and we're probably at about 209, 210. Time to pull it off. We got a lot of juices collected in here. We want to make sure to capture those because we want to run our slices back through them. So make sure that you don't spill that juice because that's liquid gold. Well, here's our rested brisket. It's been about 45 minutes since we pulled it off the pit. So we're gonna go to slice this. We wanna look and see which way the meat fibers run. So I can see those meat fibers going this direction, which means we're gonna go at a 90-degree angle in this direction. We'll just get right into the thick of it here. Start to cut us some slices. Thin enough so it has a nice mouth feel, but it should be pretty tender. We don't want them to just fall apart either. We'll just take a little slice out of here. Yeah, I'd say we got that just about right, huh? Let's check out that tug. Ooh, doesn't get much better than that. Oh, wow. You know, for all the seasonings that we put into this thing, nothing is overpowering. It's just a savory feeling all the way around. It doesn't lean in one direction or another. You think maybe with miso, you might get some of that Asian feel to it. It doesn't have necessarily an Asian flavor profile. It's just really highlighted that umami aspect of the brisket. I mean, we can just see that the surface is glistening with juices. But that hang is the real tell. I mean, when it folds over like that without falling apart, That's what you're looking for. All right, before we wrap this thing up, one critical step in this whole process when you're serving to a group is you really want to be able to keep these slices juicy and keep them warm. And one of the ways that you can do that is to take your braising liquid, put it into a shallow pan, because that right there is 100% flavor. You keep it warm, and then as your slices come out, just go ahead and store them right there in the liquid. So now when you're serving, you're gonna start serving slices out of here that are just coated in all of that sauce. Look at that, just dripping with brisket juice. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out allthingsbbq.com for all of the products featured in today's video. If you enjoyed that recipe, hit the subscribe button. If you have any questions or comments, or there's anything you'd like to see me cook, let me know in the comment section down below, and let's be good to one another. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to allthingsbbq.com/thesauce. All Things Barbecue, where barbecue legends are made.